Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Making the Case for WordPress in Education. Your speakers for today are Jeff Pfluger, Director, Agencies and Alliances here at Pantheon, along with our guest speaker, Shane Perlman, CEO of Modern Tribe. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Please make sure you submit any questions you have during the presentation in the question window. We'll answer as many of the questions as we can during the Q&A portion of today's presentation. Also, this webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be made available to everyone next week. Now a little bit about our speakers. As I mentioned, Shane Perlman is CEO of Modern Tribe, an agency that has worked with some of the world's largest brands, well-funded startups, and educational institutions, including MIT, Stanford, Harvard, Columbia, and UCSF. Beyond services, they are committed to open source, and their plugins are pushing 5 million downloads. Before Modern Tribe, he was the educational director at a private learning institution and taught both in public and private settings for a number of years. Welcome, Shane. Jeff Pfluger is Director of Agencies and Alliances here at Pantheon. Jeff is charged with helping our agency partners and allies succeed on the Pantheon platform. He started his career at Pantheon as an account executive and was responsible for signing many of our higher ed clients, including Arizona State University, UC Berkeley, and the University of Pennsylvania. In terms of agenda, we'll kick off the presentation by outlining the challenges of website content management on today's campus. We'll then discuss the findings of a recent University of Colorado Denver research study of 133 colleges and universities about website content management on their campuses. Then we'll get into the heart of the presentation where we make the case for WordPress, cover some interesting use cases that we've seen in the space, and debunk common myths about WordPress. Finally, we share how WordPress and Pantheon together make a compelling solution for education. Finally, we'll wrap up with our Q&A session. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Jeff.
Hey, thanks, Tricia. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. I just wanted to have a few words from my perspective working with literally hundreds of educational institutions across Pantheon. So Pantheon as a website management platform has been a popular choice with a lot of educational institutions that are leveraging the most popular content management systems around today, which are namely WordPress and Drupal. And one of the things that I've learned in working with so many different universities, K-9 institutions, community colleges, is that really when you look at web content management across the institution, there's a balancing act that a lot of these organizations are trying to play. On one hand, they're trying to balance the needs of the users and the people who are actually using these web content management systems to bring their content to the world with the needs and the requirements and the budgets of basically the central IT and communications departments. So, specifically the things that we know about users at a lot of universities and other educational institutions is that speed is very important. And when we talk about speed, we're not just talking about page load times, although that's exceedingly important. And both Pantheon and WordPress as solutions offer tremendous speed. But also speed in terms of the time it takes to get an idea out and published to the public. And this is where basically, if you're able to empower users and have users take control of their own publishing process, it's a big need for theirs. Another one is basically the ease of use. And that there was a day when you wanted to publish anything and you'd have to go through who knows what in terms of process to get it to the world. And today, really, the promise of modern web content management systems is that they're easy to use, anybody can get up to speed with them very quickly, and you can publish incredibly quickly. All of those types of needs and desires from the users, of course, are balanced on the IT and communication side of any campus, who's really trying to look over the quality of branding across all of the properties, and then even design, having input on design, and then really security. So if you look at the needs of any university in terms of security, if you look at what's happened to a lot of institutions where The needs we have here on the left have basically trumped a lot of the governance that the group on the right is trying to achieve. You can end up with a very decentralized approach with literally thousands of websites sprawling across the campus. A lot of campuses that we talk to literally don't even know all of the websites that are currently representing the university in various ways. So when you look at that sort of decentralized approach, you're looking at an enormous surface area in terms of security for an attack. I mean, you're looking at servers under people's desks. You're looking at unsecured website content management systems. You're looking at who knows what's been added in terms of plugins and things like this. And it really creates an environment where the university may be taking a number of risks with a decentralized approach like that. The other thing, too, that obviously the campuses are balancing is cost effectiveness. And a lot of times universities will default or decide on open source content management systems because of a perception of cost effectiveness. And that can be true, but probably a bigger argument for saving costs across campus has to do with trying to take a centralized approach. We see a lot of institutions that try to basically get all of those websites in under one department so they can manage security effectively and everything else, but there's also enormous costs to be saved if there's one place to basically manage all of these. So we're going to basically today talk about tools that you can use to help you make the case for WordPress on campus. We think that we've seen WordPress just skyrocket in terms of popularity, and on campus it has a very important place. Shane Perlman, as the CEO of Modern Tribe, was the co-author of this ebook. There's a link there that you could link to. And then also here's a piece of collateral in terms of Pantheon for EDU. We have a specialized product just for educational institutions that we'll be able to provide as well. And with that, I'd really like to introduce you to Shane Perlman to take you further into making the case for WordPress on campus.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. My goal is to set you up with the information you need to make a case in-house. So a lot of times when we sit down and we have initial conversations with organizations, they're reviewing multiple different platforms and opportunities. And we're often asked to come in as an outside vendor and give context. So let's go through. First of all, WordPress has had absolutely massive adoption over the last handful of years. If you look at built with, WordPress is 53% of the top 1 million sites on the web. It's got over 3 times as many sites as Joomla and Drupal combined. If you look at W3 Tech, another source, WordPress is used on over 58% of sites that use a CMS. And in fact, it's used on nearly 25% of the entire internet, not including sites that don't use a CMS or hand-built or custom-built. It is the juggernaut. So why does this even matter? Who cares? Well, it means that it's really, really likely that people who are going to contribute to your site have used it in the past. It means they're familiar with it. The WordPress adoption means it's easy. It comes out of the fact that it's easy to use, which means less training and support. And the fact is there's also just an enormous amount of training resources available on the web. So if your organization doesn't have to teach people how to use it, you can point them to WordPress.tv or WordPress Beginner or all the different resources available. When you also have that many people using the platform, it means that features get heavily tested. The core of WordPress is barraged by 1/4 of the internet, and that means that things are rapidly reported and rapidly updated, and that it has an enormous community behind it who's improving. When it comes to higher ed specifically, we had an opportunity to work with the University of Colorado. They reached out to us as part of an RFI. And one of the questions they're asking is they were analyzing a number of different platforms, both proprietary and open source, and they asked us for referrals to WordPress campuses that use WordPress. We have a big reach, and we offered to connect them. The survey was really interesting. They had over 133 different universities and colleges reply, and they're actually happy to give out that data. But the #1 and #2 CMSs of choice were Drupal and WordPress. Open source just dominated. Word for secondary properties, so not for the main EDU property, but for secondary properties and secondary usage, WordPress was way far above and beyond the most common platform used. And these weren't for tiny little sites either. Over a third of the respondents had over 100 content editors or more using these platforms. When we also looked at, they had a satisfaction that got broken over a number of different facets. WordPress had an overall satisfaction rating higher than nearly all of the other systems, but not all, but nearly all. It was a very interesting data set. So, ease of use. I mean, we often get asked why we as a company ended up centralizing on WordPress. And to be transparent, this is, depending on how you look at it, we're either in our 10th or 15th year. We merged 10 years ago as a company. And we used to work with Joomla and Drupal and CMS. We had a custom system. We worked in a number of, even some Ruby on Rails work. We had a number of different platforms that we engaged with. And so we would go out and we would custom design and we would build a solution for a customer. And usually, especially in higher ed or nonprofit public organizations, somewhere between 6 months and a year, we would get a phone call that sounds like this. Hi, Shane. So the only person who could figure out how to deal with our website just changed departments. Could you train us all over again on how to do this because nobody could figure it out? Except on our WordPress projects. Our WordPress projects, we would get a call that sounded a lot more like, hey, this website is awesome. We've really had great success. Everybody can figure it out. Can we talk about the next round of features we want to build? And that was such a consistent experience for us as a company that we started doing more and more WordPress because happy customers meant repeat business. It came down to the fact that as an editorial tool, it was so far and above more intuitive than a number of the other systems out there which is not surprising. If you look at the adoption numbers that it's had over the last few years, that really pushed it forward. WordPress is interesting in the sense that it has a massive open source community. One of our team members is on the accessibility team. And we had a huge party a few weeks ago because one of the big things that they've been working on hard that they actually got through was a commitment from WordPress core as of February that the core project and any bundled themes that come with the project are going to conform with WCAG 2.0 guidelines at the AA level. That's a big win for accessibility. And that means that if WordPress core matches accessibility, there's going to be a lot of pressure and energy from the community to make sure that associated plugins and themes do as well. It's interesting because WordPress has a long history and basis over the last handful of years of really focusing on accessibility, from Matt Mullenweg, the founder of WordPress, on stage 2 years ago saying that that was going to be a commitment, through to real practical. So we had a project for Stanford Law School. We actually rebuilt the main EDU property for the law school, and as part of the process, we were the only WordPress vendor. Everybody else was Drupal. They actually had us pass recent past higher education projects to a blind accessibility expert they hired to review projects. So she reviewed a project that we built for MIT and a project we've built for Harvard. And she came back and said it was by far above the best. Now, I'm not saying that to brag at all. We did pay attention, but the fact is we didn't actually do that much. We just followed the standards that are built into WordPress. It was a case where WordPress in and of itself was far more accessible from a baseline perspective than the other platforms she was analyzing. WordPress is interesting when it comes to scale as well. Now, a lot of times people go, well, can you scale it? And to start, we have to talk about what does scale mean. Do you mean wide or tall? So when we look at what does scaling wide mean, it means hundreds and hundreds of websites. That's actually a very common thing among universities, different departments, different organizations, from down to the, we're working with a public school district in Texas right now where they're even every booster club, sports team, everybody has a site. And so being able to create a system and framework to manage that level of diversity and breadth. WordPress is great. First, out of the box, it comes with a framework called Multisite, which lets you control permissions for different users. It lets you create a basis for common code, so you can have a common theme, common plugins by default on and off, and it allows, under certain controls, a certain amount of individualization as necessary. Other people have taken it a different approach. So Boston University is going to be giving a talk at WP Campus, which is a higher education conference coming up in July. By the way, tickets are on sale. I'll be speaking there as well. But I'm looking forward to their talk because they've built a whole deployment framework that allows them to handle a huge diversity of sites with common code. Pantheon also has a great deployment solution with their custom upstreams. So if you look at, like, can WordPress handle a lot of sites? Heck yeah. In fact, some of the largest sites in the world are running hundreds and hundreds of sites. So you can scale wide. You can also ask, does WordPress scale high in terms of traffic? If we pour millions of people onto the site, will it survive? And the fact is, with the right hosting partner and the right approach to development, some of the biggest sites in the world are running WordPress. We're actually actively working with Forbes right now to relaunch their Middle Eastern and African divisions on WordPress. But you've got CNN, Time, NBC. We worked recently with a project for a radio station network that had over 300 radio stations and 25 million unique visitors a month. With the right framework, WordPress scales, and it scales gracefully. Open CMS. You know, for many of you who are familiar with kind of open source and its advantages, that's why I bundled it all in one slide to be quick. But the key things here is you get to own your own data. Nobody locks your data up. You're not tied to any service. You're not tied to any vendor. A lot of the proprietary systems either have a very small group of vendors or they are the only vendor. WordPress has a very rich ecosystem with from freelancers up to major international agencies like ours. There are no proprietary license fees. It's very cost efficient from a hosting and licensing perspective, and it's easily extensible. And we'll go into the extensibility more, but you've got a world of plugins, themes. WordPress has an evolving and robust API. One of the things that we often end up talking to people about is SEO. So, you know, when you're a university, recruiting matters. Its question is, can you get the next generation of students, and making sure that your content is getting out there. WordPress's history as a blogging platform made SEO important on day one. And there is years and years of effort to make sure that the templates and that the way content is organized is highly digestible for the primary search engines. Beyond that, there are some great SEO plugins that extend reach. At the same time, to be fair, SEO comes down to writing great content and being consistent and filling out the necessary meta to make sure that search engines know what to do with. As long as your platform is easy to use, the more great content people can create, the better your SEO is. So it's a twofer. WordPress has an evolving API. So since the last year, the number of people in the core team have been building a plugin that extends WordPress into a JSON API. In the late part of 2015, late last year, the first half of the API was merged into core, and the API team is working really hard to get the 2.0 version of the API rolled out. So what do you do with an API? For us, it's really a question of, can you take the data within WordPress and use it in other contexts? So we've watched universities build mobile apps, being able to pull from things like calendar data, contact information. Same with digital signage solutions. We've actually integrated it with email marketing to provide personalized, timely experiences. It could be tours, and it just grows from there. It's a transition from kind of a CMS to being the beginning of an application platform. WordPress and Drupal have taken very, very different stances as to how the platform should evolve. And this is kind of one of the big differences that people really feel. WordPress really put itself in the backwards compatibility camp. The idea is that at any time somebody should be able to hit update without any significant pain. That doesn't mean small things won't break, but overall that is a core mission for the WordPress team. The advantage, well, you're going to have minimal breakage, but it does have a small challenge, and the challenge is that having to carry your history with you can inhibit innovation. Drupal, on the other hand, decided that at every major version, they're going to shed baggage, which has its advantages. Also, realistically, it also sheds users. If every time there's a major version, you pretty much have to rebuild your website, that's expensive, it's frustrating. And these are just different philosophies. I don't think either one's right or wrong. They both have strengths and weaknesses. But I would say that, and a lot of people would agree, that WordPress's commitment to backwards compatibility has been a major part in its explosive growth. So common misconceptions. Often when we're out meeting with universities, we typically end up hearing three kind of misconceptions we need to address. The first is it doesn't scale. And that means wide or tall, and that's misinformation. Like straight up, WordPress.com, for example, as the SaaS hosting platform, is the world's 35th highest traffic website according to Alexa, and it's running on a single WordPress multisite. I mean, it's up there with LinkedIn and Yahoo as far as traffic. It's amazing. There are a lot of very high traffic and very large WordPress builds. Security is a tough one. So first of all, WordPress core is extremely secure. We have a dedicated security team, and with the number of people who pay attention to it, things get patched very quickly. Often the vulnerabilities that you hear about, well, they come from two areas. They come from poorly managed hosting environments. It's not uncommon for us to be called in to help with somebody who has been hacked, to find out they're on a very cheap shared environment, and even their code was fine, but somebody else on the server got hacked and the infection came over, which is why getting a good hosting partner is really critical. The other area that we often see issues comes from unsecured extensions. So, WordPress.org has something like 40,000, 50,000 plugins that you can choose from, and those are written by anybody who wants to contribute. The core team does its very best to review these and make sure they're quality, but you need to have a good technical partner, whether it's internally or externally, who does code reviews to make sure that things that come in follow best practices. That is a necessary part of running a secure platform. Also, we still, less often than we used to, but we still hear it's just for blogs. And the fact is that it's been a long time since WordPress was just for blogs. WordPress 5-7 years ago evolved into being one of the preeminent CMSs. And what we're seeing right now is an evolution into, we've been calling it, Matt Mullenweg pitched as an application framework. We're seeing learning management systems, complex course catalogs, event management, ticketing, and a lot of tools that are straightforward, complex software being powered by WordPress. So let's take you through some of these actual case studies. What are different ways that you could use WordPress for your institution? Well, you could power your primary website, your core edu. So for example, in the last year, we've launched both Harvard Law School and Stanford Law School's primary properties. And it's everything you would think it would be, dealing with everything from recruiting to finances to alumni, faculty, and all the different user groups that you imagine. You can also use it to power publications. And this goes a lot more than just articles and blogs. So for example, we worked with MIT Sloan's Business School to take their academic publications and move them online. So they had nearly 50, 60 years of archival content. And we worked with them to not just list articles chronologically, but be able to get their editorial team together to create catered and contextually relevant stuff, to pull evergreen content together with new content to tell stories that are meaningful at that moment. we worked with them to build and design a complex paywall so that for library partners, if you were using a library IP, you would get access to paid content for free. We had a token-based membership where people were able to get up to 3 free articles a month, and then it had to renew and wait for the next month. They had paid membership subscriptions for print, different ones for digital, and all this varied by different countries because they had a global audience. Beyond paywalls, we also created a system so that every time an article got published, it would automatically generate a beautifully designed PDF and push it out for EPUB and Mobi so that people could read it and make it available on Amazon and Apple stores. We designed long-form research content. So they published enormously long research studies to the web. And so being able to build in footnotes and tables of contents and all kinds of things that make academic research easy to digest online. We've worked with a number of other different, we worked with Columbia Law Review. We're actually actively working with Stanford's Law Review at the moment. But academic publications are a huge thing. This is one people don't typically imagine. So cafeteria and food management, but most from public schools up to higher education schools, from kindergarten to college, y'all eat. And so we've worked with a number of different organizations. This is a screenshot from Bon Appetit, which is a management company that runs restaurants for higher education organizations, everybody from Duke to Notre Dame to Johns Hopkins. They approached us because they wanted to be able to create a much better experience for consumers, for students. So we used WordPress to tap into a number of different APIs, nutritional information, allergy information, as well as complex menu management that their chefs use to run all the different restaurants, and make it so that people could get a sense based on where they're at this moment on their phone or their computer, location, time, and context aware, what food's being served where, when the restaurant's going to close. We did a bunch of research and found out that nothing gets students more upset than walking across campus only to have the restaurant close in their face. So being able to do that, as well as being able to allow people to sign up for specialized and personalized emails. So, for example, we had students who said, look, I just want to know when there's a vegan special. Or actually, at Santa Clara, the #1 request was, please let us know when popcorn chicken coming because it's fantastic. And so being able to create these personalized email notices. We also built a digital signage solution. So when you were able to have this WordPress API, we were able to tap into the API, get cheap televisions, a Google Chrome stick, and be able to display today's specials, as well as nutritional information. And even in this case, we had a database that looked at the vendors. So we could tell you what farmers grew the food that you're eating today. We are actually just starting on a project for the Conroe School District in Texas to help them manage their meal planning across 63 schools and how to inform parents what's coming up for lunch this week and whether or not you want to bring food, pack food, or buy food for your children. Digital signage. There are all kinds of variations of this, but this is basically taking the information. So this is a screenshot of the digital signage we did for Harvard. And when you walk into the law school offices, you get a heads up on major events that are happening, news, and any kind of key information. I'm going to move it along in respect for time. Event management is a major part for universities. So whether it's master calendars or shared calendars between sub-organizations, we've done community calendars where people can submit. So this screenshot is from Washington State, which runs their master calendar using our event calendar software. And I'll introduce that. We have a lot. We have over 500 universities, from University of Mary Washington, Yale, UC Berkeley, Boise State, Stanford, Harvard. A lot of universities are using WordPress to power their events. We happen to know a heck a lot about events. Modern Tribe runs the largest open source event management framework on top of WordPress called the Events Calendar. We have over 400,000 sites. You can go to the next slide. We have over 400,000 sites that are actively running it. It's free. Go grab it. Use it at your university. We have over 1,000 5-star reviews. I can tell you there's 500 plus educational institutions that use it. And if you want to expand and do more on top of it, we have a commercial layer plugins that we sell that are typically in about $50 to $100, so that you could sell tickets, whether that's that you could share on social and coordinate with Facebook and other platforms, that you can use an aggregator so that you can push and pull events from a master calendar to local calendars that could be filtered. This is a substantial business. So we also do a lot of customization. For example, for Harvard, we integrate it with EMS so that they could use EMS as they do to manage all their facilities, but we could coordinate their events calendar between it. For Stanford, they wanted a way for students to submit events, but for it to go through a review process so that student affairs could review and give feedback to students before it was posted or approve it. For facilities to have any feedback on any event that would happen on campus. So there's a lot of kind of growing customizations that we see happening. Course catalogs. Actually, it's interesting. I had a real struggle in this time slot because we're kicking off a complex integration with WordPress and Accolog right now. So my team is running that while I'm talking to you for a large educational institution. But why would you mess with your course catalog? Well, in our case, we did a lot of research for Stanford when we looked at their primary property. And one of the requests students had was, I would like to have a lot more control and visibility into scheduling options. And so they gave us examples like, hey, I'm only available in the afternoons, Tuesday and Thursday. It'd be really nice to be able to see the course catalog and say, look, for spring, show me things available Tuesday and Thursday afternoons that meet this particular graduation requirement. And so we built in a number of different filters, from units to type of course to graduation requirements that have been meeting. And this is all powered by the WordPress API integrating with the main Stanford Registrar's API. You also have personnel directories, a very common university. This is a screenshot from the Conroe School District, Texas. They're the largest independent school district in Texas. I think it's 63 elementary, junior high, and high schools. And being able to create a global directory that pulls from all the different schools, but also is filtered down at the individual school level, and being able to contact people. In some cases, directories can be very simple and straightforward, like this is basically a Rolodex. In other cases, like for Stanford, we ended up making a fairly, not complex isn't the right word, we gave people the power to tell stories within their individual profiles. Because for Stanford Law School, if you actually put the amount of traffic all the individual faculty profiles get together, it was the 4th highest visited part of the university. Their faculty have enormous reach and impact on the world. And so a lot of them are publishing books, they're doing international research and sabbaticals, they're doing things that have real meaning and impact on the world. We wanted a way for them to be able to tell that story. You're also seeing an explosion in course management and learning management systems. So you have the big, typically a lot of people are on Blackboard or Moodle, and those are fantastic. But what we're starting to see is smaller and nimble players really coming in. So you've got WordPress plugins like Lifter that are doing a really great job handling courses. Automatic, the company that runs WordPress.com, just acquired WooThemes, which has a LMS system called Sensei, which is well established. And there's a team, Elements LMS, that has been using Sensei to bring it up to enterprise level and higher education. Been doing a great job. I think when we talk about WordPress as an application platform, a really great example, we spent about 1.5 years working with Macmillan, the publishing company, their educational group, because they were trying to figure out great ways to push educational content digitally into classrooms. And so we spent about 1.5 years working with them on a beta project to give every kid an iPad or an Android, work with either, and be able to allow the teacher to search a huge database of educational content, from books to games, quizzes, worksheets, just a very broad group, all tied to necessary core curriculum requirements. So a teacher could search and say, okay, I need to meet this particular curriculum requirement for my region. All of this took a lot of the global requirements into play, and then push that out to their students for their different classes and see how they're doing. So to be able to get feedback on reading, like how far have they read, the kind of test scores they're getting. And in our case, WordPress was the interaction point for the teachers and the students. We pushed and pulled data. We also found in the beta, this was rolled out all over Australia and New Zealand as our test countries. It's at, I think, close to 10,000 schools. And we ended up finding that there were more and more needs. So students wanted to be able to talk to each other once they went home and had questions. So we ended up putting up a quick chat solution tied into the permissioning system, so students in a particular class could ask questions to their teacher once they got home from within the apps. Outside, beyond course management, a lot of times we see these really interesting microsites pop up. So you can use WordPress to power major milestones that are happening, reunions, events, marketing initiatives. I've seen really good microsites explaining major construction projects, for example. How is this going to impact you and what is all the deal? So this is a screenshot. You can check it out at some point. Stanford is having their 125th anniversary at this point. We've been working with them for the year, building into the celebration. So that's tying into major events, pulling in stories, timelines, histories, interactive before and after experiences. But that's a wide variety of possibilities. You also have blogs. Now, I say blogs and everybody's like, yeah, but you have to get a sense of the scope of some of the blog frameworks that universities put together. VCU has over 13,000 blogs, 14,000 users on their own single build of, on their single WordPress multi-site build. University of Mary Washington has over 7,000 in blogs with over 10,000 individual users contributing to those on their single instance. So there are huge networks out there that universities power classroom, student, and all kinds of organizational communication. When it comes down to who's using WordPress, I just started to make a list for this slide, and it's a mixture of users we know from our events calendar. I talked to the group at WP Campus, which is a WordPress Slack group that people are welcome to join. When you meet with your stakeholders, you can see this just enormous reach and adoption that WordPress has globally. I mean, it's 50% of all CMS websites in the world, as well as the fact that it's gotten so much momentum in higher education. I mean, it's the #1 choice for secondary properties, and you can see the pacing as it's growing more and more for primary properties, as well as the wide range of application and use cases. If you're sitting down internally and having a debate, go grab a copy of our white paper. We went into a lot more depth on particular issues, strengths, concerns, and that's the summary of what I've got to run you through today. I look forward to talking to each of you individually if you have questions or interests. At this point, I'm going to hand it back to Jeff to kind of give you a sense of, I'll tell you as an outside, Pantheon's a fantastic partner to work with. They build a nice, strong, stable infrastructure that we really like to be able to depend on.
Cool, thanks Shane, that was fantastic. And you know, the work Modern Tribe has been doing in higher education with educational institutions is amazing. We're really pleased to have you presenting at this webinar, Shane, and that was some great work you were showing. You know, Pantheon made a choice that obvious, you know, the obvious adoption of WordPress and Drupal for educational institutions is you know, undeniable, and for a lot of the reasons that Shane was laying out. And as a technology platform, as a website management platform, what Pantheon's mission is basically to leverage those content management systems and provide some additional functionality that makes adoption of these content management systems at scale for universities even easier. So we are a website content management system. In terms of speed, you know, we have best-in-class caching built in, so page load times are fast. We empower users to take control of their own development by baking in best practices. So Basically, there's separate dev test and live environments. We provide guardrails that make it easier for developers to do the right thing while still giving them the power to really customize their applications, and for development agencies to do the same. And we want to keep it. We want to keep the ease of use, make it as easy as possible, basically, as you extend these applications, both for the agencies that are building the application and for the users of these web content management systems. In terms of branding, we have a custom upstream technology where you can basically build one app and deploy it to thousands of websites, and makes the updating process very simple. And really, one of the values that we provide in terms of security for that IT team is a very clear path forward in terms of centralizing your Drupal and WordPress applications across campus, offering a service across campus where the security is managed entirely for you by Pantheon. And again, we have that best in breed, sort of guardrails, best in class development best processes that are available for people, so that you know that people are doing things securely and in the same way. And ultimately, when you're considering centralizing and finding these types of efficiencies, what it comes down to is really a sort of a cost-effective solution. So when you look at what Pantheon is actually then providing sort of beneath WordPress or beneath Drupal, there are several things. I mean, first of all, in terms of speed, compared to other platforms out there, we're very fast, and that means better for SEO. More users visit more pages, ingest more content, and that's all great for marketing teams. But then in terms of specific features, a lot of these problems are big ones when you're talking about managing hundreds or thousands of sites. So for example, backups. That's something that Pantheon can do on a per-site basis, and you can restore with a click of a button. Automated DevOps. So basically, using our platform means that you don't have to have a team or basically anybody involved in managing infrastructure any longer. We have a single container-based, multi-tenant platform. It's a step above basically building out infrastructure custom for every problem that you encounter. Continuous integration. So today's developers want to iterate quickly, add features quickly, be able to test them quickly, and our platform allows to do that in a very safe and secure manner. We have an organizational dashboard, so your IT team can log in and see all of the projects across campus. And each WordPress or Drupal site has its own dedicated resources, even its own developers that you can have working on it. So you can manage the team or the teams pretty efficiently. To give you an idea of the scope of this, universities will have hundreds of sites in an organizational dashboard like that, and then even hundreds of developers that they're managing across those sites. And it's easy to set who has access to what. These are open source content management systems, so we want to make updates easy. You can do those with a click of a button in the dashboard, and you do it in the development environment, you test those changes, and then you deploy it live. So you reduce the risk of basically shooting yourself in the foot when all you wanted to do was make an update to WordPress or Drupal. As I mentioned, we provide advanced caching as just part of the platform, which means page load speeds are fast. And the role-based permissions. So you're even able to get more granular and say exactly who has access and at what level. Are they a developer and they're able to actually code and push things all the way to production, or are they just a content user and changing content in their WordPress or Drupal application? So in terms of next steps, the great thing about Pantheon is you can really, and with WordPress, it's very easy to get up to speed and test all of this out for yourself. So on Pantheon, a great next step is to basically go to pantheon.io and sign up for a free EDU account. So we provide free accounts to developers to see our development tools. We only ask that you pay once you want to point a domain name to your website. But if you are an EDU institution, you can unlock a whole variety of additional tools just by signing up. So this is a great next step right here. Then go ahead and spin up a dev site, invite some team members in terms of developers, and you can reach out to Modern Tribe. So the URL is http://tri.be/highered, or you can email Shane and the team at sales@tri.be. And that's it. We'd like to be able to take some questions now from everybody that's out there, and let's get to them.
Great. Thanks, Jeff and Shane. So we've got a couple questions here. First question is, how can a developer make the case for WordPress to higher ups when they argue that WordPress is not secure and not scalable?
Sure. So I find that the scalable argument is the easier one to solve quickly. And that one you just show case studies. You know, like it's really hard to say WordPress isn't scalable when you're like, well, Time Magazine runs on it. Well, CNN runs on it. You know, and if it's good for them, like I really doubt we're ever going to throw that much traffic at it that compares. So the security one's tougher, and part of that is history. So there was a time period when WordPress was making its transition from blog software to CMS in about 2008, 2009. And during that time period, the community just wasn't that worried about security. And as it gained enough, momentum, it was an ugly couple of like 6 to 9 months where WordPress had a lot of issues. At which point they formed a core security team, they fixed most of the issues, and almost always, anytime somebody Googles WordPress security issues, it's almost always something from that era. And so part of it is just explaining to people, look, when you Google randomly, you got to remember, like, you got to put in timeline and context in it. The WordPress core itself is extremely secure this day and age. A number of people put a lot of energy into that. Outside of that, the risks are the same risks you would run with Drupal or anything else, which is if you're going to go pick up random code off the internet and stick into your system, well, I would say practice safe plugins. That's really key when it comes to working with any open source project. And then also just having the right hosting and development partners, whether it's just, especially if you're going to create a multi-site framework, don't just let anybody on any site stick any plugin into your system. That's a real risk. Have some kind of review process that makes sure, and that's something Pantheon does very well.
That's great. And I'd also add one of the things that you can really do. I mean, the most effective thing in my experience is actually giving some use cases of some very high-profile websites that have chosen WordPress and are very successful at it. And we have lots of examples in higher education. I mean, Shane has just showed you some, but that's a great thing to share.
Great. How have you had success in keeping multi-site implementations from spiraling out of control with large clients, such as universities, where the number of sites can be in the hundreds?
That's a really great question, and just to sort of jump on that, I'll have a little bit of perspective, and I'm sure Shane will as well. But from Pantheon's perspective, the way we look at this is that both WordPress, with a site network, and then Drupal with Drupal multi-site, both have a way of basically turning a single instance of either Drupal or WordPress into what looks like many sites. And there can be some advantages there. There can also be some downside when each one of those sites starts to want to become something a little bit more custom than just one shoe fits all. And you're starting to build something that's a little bit more of a custom application. So what we see a lot of times is that universities will start down a path of let's just have one instance solve everything, and then as they begin to customize, things can spiral out of control. So Pantheon's approach to this really is, hey, let's let multi-site or WordPress site networks shine where it's really great, and support those use cases, and then also at the same time give the flexibility to spin a multi-site out, create a custom upstream, and then create basically dedicated environments for each website, and then each one of those websites can have a life of its own and build on top. So the use case that we see a lot of times is, for example, a university wants to integrate their single sign-on across all of their websites. So they can build an application that has a number of plugins or modules on the Drupal side built in, including their single sign-on integration. They can package that up as a custom upstream. Anybody at campus can log in, create a site with a click of a button, and when you have hundreds of these sites and you need to make a change, you do it in one place, and those changes get pushed out in a safe way to all of them. So basically the answer is, yes, we've seen success with it, and it's a balancing act of really understanding what the use case is and proposing the best path forward.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff touched on it well. Often with universities, and this is true as well for public, K through 12 schools, governance is a huge and complex problem. And so it comes down to starting with a question when you're looking at a multi-site of making sure that you align your philosophy to the needs of your user base. Because it's really common for a university to approach us and start with, okay, we need to create a really complex permissioning system where people can do some of this but not others because they don't want it. And by the time it's done, it's so hard to use, people usually walk away. Or vice versa. A lot of times, to me, the challenge when we start working with universities is to actually define the base requirements of control. If we can figure out, okay, what can and should people be able to change and what can they not? And starting to look at, okay, well, if we wanted to, so we're working with Stanford right now to roll out a series of child sites because they have these centers and programs who have their own funding, their own missions, but want to benefit from a lot of the features that the core system has. But they also have some of their own needs. So being able to lay in things like WordPress has a framework we call child themes. So you could have a parent theme, which has all the core code and core approach and core look and feel of the main framework. And if somebody needs to go a little bit off the reservation and change patterns or add a couple new features, they can do that in a child theme while still allowing the parent theme to get updated. That's also common with things like certain canonical organizational plugins you might create. You can have plugins that get pushed out to everybody, and then some teams can add their own customizations separately within each individual WordPress site. Sometimes, though, this is a personal opinion, I think sometimes people actually go to multi-site too quickly. And that is, you know, we've sat down with a number where they say, okay, well, every department should have its own site. And I'm like, do you really mean that? Or do you mean every department needs to have a slightly individualized look and feel and the ability to have slightly different content? Because that actually doesn't require new code. We often create, internally we call them flavors just because there's no great industry name for them. But the ability to say, hey, for this series of URLs, I want you to use this font stack, this logo, and this primary and secondary color. And then it just gets applied to that domain and any children URL of it. And from that handles like 90% of the time, that handles all the needs people claim they need for their own site. So I think a lot of the challenges in terms of controlling it is actually one of strategy and governance, not just code.
Great, thanks, Shane. Another question, does Pantheon offer full support of WordPress multi-site networks? What plans support this?
Yeah, so this is Jeff chiming in from Pantheon. Yes, definitely. We support WordPress multi-site networks, and in terms of plans, we support that at our elite plan level. Usually, the use case there is large enough that that's the plan that's important to consider.
All right. Let's see. Question about Facebook. As Facebook extends its developer kit with third-party plugins, content sharing and management, messaging, search, social, etc., how is WordPress positioning itself to compete with the Facebook juggernaut? And then, especially since students are more Facebook connected these days.
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. To be fair, like this is my opinion. You don't need to compete with it. You need to embrace it. And that's a question to me. Is if you look at where content is and how to interact with it, the nice thing is Facebook has an API. For example, with our ticketing framework, we have a sharing plugin that allows you to push and pull events back and forth between your calendar and Facebook. You want that content in Facebook. If that's where the students are, you don't need to like, at the end of the day, does it really matter if somebody fell in love with their university via your website or via Facebook? No, as long as your content and the strategy that you have is reaching them. So there are a lot of ways that WordPress integrates gracefully with Facebook. You've got simple things like WordPress and Facebook comments. Being able to replace your standard WordPress comments with Facebook comments so that every time somebody comments on a site, they also share it with their network. And then you've got a wide variety of customized tools that allow you to deal with messaging, to deal with information sharing, and so forth, back and forth.
Great. Okay, our last question. For WordPress, my conclusion is that we have to buy plugins to achieve more complex sites, but then the plugins are not compatible with each other. Plugins are interdependent systems. What do you think about it?
Yes, that is no question a challenge. And I have two different sets of thoughts on that. The first is that's part of what a great partner or a great in-house team does. They look at the different code stacks and they choose wisely. Now, when it comes to choosing wisely, a lot of times when you look at a plugin, look at the reviews. Look at who wrote it. We put an enormous amount of time trying to make sure that our core plugins, the big ones we put out on .org, are compatible with the other major frameworks. Sometimes people write major frameworks that don't play well, and that's frustrating to everybody in the environment. So we've put, for example, we've put an enormous amount of time in the last year, and we still have a way to go to integrating with WP multilingual. There are a lot of sites in the world that need to be in multiple languages, and the folks that are building that plugin have achieved enormous momentum, but it's a challenging framework to integrate with. And it's something that we put a lot of work in because we think it's important, but there's no guarantees that other people do. I actually think that's one of the advantages of the commercial plugins. When there is money and revenue behind something, you have a genuine incentive to go the extra mile. When we have paying customers who want something and they fund us to do that, then we have an incentive, and so we put a lot more work into it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shane, and thanks everyone for attending. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. If you have any questions or feedback, please visit our website, pantheon.io, where you'll find a Contact Us page, and we can put you in touch with the most appropriate member of our team. As I mentioned, the webinar has been recorded, and we will share both the webinar recording as well as links to the two assets that Jeff talked about earlier. Thank you for your time, and have a great day.
Yeah, and if you want to ask more questions, feel free to hit up the Modern Tribe Twitter. So that's Modern Tribe Inc. on Twitter, and I'll hang out with my team and we'll reply for a little while.
Great. Thanks, everyone.